Alrighty, we're back. Planet Green Trees, episode 152. Oops. And, of course, MMA 101 Part 2. We want to go immediately to our phone because we have an attorney waiting. We don't want that to happen. But I'm glad that we have him back. John Targowski, good friend, and, of course...
Hey, guys, can you hear me good?
We can. Can you hear us okay?
Yeah.
All right, good. First of all, thanks for all the drama with this injury thing that you conjured up. A lot of people were very, very concerned. You're back at it, no problem. But no, I'm glad to hear you're doing better.
So, like some people, a lot of people know I had my marriage ended earlier this spring, and I took some time off, went out west, and I basically, I'm a paraplegic wheelchair user, and I don't really have a lot of sensation in my legs, and I burned them, exposing them to some, basically a steam valve when I was working on some stuff. And I didn't really know I was pretty badly burned right away because I don't feel it. And then once I did realize it, I kind of minimized it. And I tried to actually go home or go towards some friends in Colorado and from California by car. And I got as far as about Utah. And it was starting to get pretty bad. I really couldn't keep up with the wound care, and I kind of went into shock on the freeway. And it didn't really turn into an accident or anything specifically serious or anything like that. But I spent a week in the University of Utah at the burn unit there, and pretty much I was the only guy that wasn't in constant agonizing pain because I really couldn't feel what happened to me. And what happened to me specifically was about third-degree burns on 4% of my body, which isn't a lot. But it involves. I mean, I'm not 100% back. I had to give away a couple cases, several cases, 2 federal cases, and a couple cases that were going to trial in the early summer, just because I kind of just want to take it easy. But I don't have to have skin grafts, so that was really, going to keep me out of the hospital again and just keep me pretty much an outpatient. So that's kind of what's going on with me, and things right now are doing a lot better.
Great. Well, God bless.
Glad to hear that. Glad to hear you're back. Any time frame in which you're going to begin to get back in the forum?
Yeah, I know. I'm consulting with clients, and I'm making a few appearances. I haven't had anything contested in terms of contested appearances, but I'm basically I'm going to try to take it easy this summer until I heal up a little bit more before I really try to go 100%. So it's kind of too bad because we have a lot of fertile things that happened in the last couple weeks. People v. Kuhn, that certainly sets the standard differently for what the government has to show to convict you of a crime, and definitely includes some lawyering. I definitely have a couple cases that would have resulted in a dramatically different outcome if the trial court came to the right decision, but if the Court of Appeal hadn't had that relatively intellectually dishonest reversal saying we're all treated to the same, to presence of instead of intoxicated by cannabinoids, then a lot of people's lives would be different.
Let's talk about this one thing. What do you think about retroactivity?
It's certainly in effect, and let me give you an analog. In May of 2012, it came out. It gave people that didn't have Section 4 compliance, Section 8 relief. And at the time, I had 2 cases, one post-plea to a felony pre-sentence. The other guy was already on felony probation, and I filed 2 different motions. These were in 2 different counties. If you haven't been sentenced yet, then you file a motion to withdraw your plea. In this case, it was granted, and I ended up negotiating a dramatically different sentence. In the other county where the guy was already on probation, we got a successful motion to relief from judgment where in that particular issue, it's all about retroactivity, and Kolinek was retroactive in the judge's eyes on that case. So if Kolinek's retroactive, and it's basically a kind of a delayed sort of de novo statutory interpretation of a statute that was the exact same at the time the plea happened, which is certainly true in the Kuhn driving case, then I have, pretty sincere hope that it's going to be, found retroactive because nothing else has changed.
Were the cases that you used, King or Kolinek, to set aside pleas? Were they in circuit court?
They were outdoor grows that were.
No, circuit court or district court?
They were both in circuit court.
Yeah. What about the cases that are, misdemeanor? What's the relief? It's not you don't really have a 6,500 motion. That's the challenge. But I agree with you that it should apply retroactively. Am I right? It's got to be based.
Yeah, I mean, process. It doesn't. There's no reason why it shouldn't. I think, but I think you have. It may not be a 6,500 motion, but I think the first area of relief does come down to the sentencing court, and they have a shot at it before you go to circuit court for a district court appeal. I'm pretty sure that's the way it is. Maybe there's some procedural people out here, that have something different, but I think there's post-conviction relief. There has to be.
I would agree.
So
it's just a question of finding it, but it's hard to. Those judges, they don't get paid for opening up cases; they get paid for closing them, right? But so, John, we've been doing this. We're in a two-part series right now of the history of the MMA, and kind of reflecting back, we had a kind of an era carved out that we were calling the Renaissance era, which was like the initiative period of time, 2008 to about when the raids and dispensaries first began. It was a new time, a lot of no real cases had come down. Maybe Redden, was the first thing, which was should have been
good.
Certainly,
it was certainly kind of an area for lawyers, at least for the sort of the people that were caregiving and kind of creating new business models and dispensing. That was kind of a Wild West era, and certainly where certain people pushed the limit, and there was some competition in commerce and the market and so forth. And I didn't have a lot of experience, firsthand in that, but from our end of it, where there wasn't like a whole field of binding case law that settles, some pretty large major issues, it was a very creative period even for lawyers because we got to, we got to use the tools we wanted to use instead of the ones that we had to use, and that was a lot of fun. I feel like, that's probably a version of that's probably going to be happening in the next 12 to 18 months in Colorado and Washington as they figure out a certain amount of things. But, that's also, those two states are kind of doing that in a backdrop politically and socially of marijuana as being, obviously much more accepted and regulated and, legalization as inevitable versus just, inadvisable. And I definitely feel that when I deal with drug cops and law enforcement that, whereas in 2008 or 9, the Medical Marijuana Act was some aberration, some product of out-of-state money. It was a manipulation of the voters' compassion to for whatever reason. That was their standard, motive and their message. Them being law enforcement, specifically drug team police that I interact with sometimes in courtroom hallways. And now, nobody's honestly having, a really, strong conversation that we're not in, the real end days of this. And that's a dramatically different message. But in terms of, the lawyering and what cases we could use and what we were doing, I remember Matt Abel and I both had cases in, I think, 2009 in Cass County. His was the Vanderbutts case. Mine was a case called Parker that we ended up getting a good deal on because this was one of the cases where they didn't really do an affirmative defense in that county yet, and we threatened to bring the doctor, and the doctor was going to come, and they just gave us, misdemeanors on a grow case, which in that county was a gift. So, but, if I can import anything into what we're feeling now, it's that now there's a whole field of cases that lock lawyers in, but there's also a public perception that, we're in some sort of transition period. Medical marijuana is the don't ask, don't tell of the drug war. It's an interim policy, and that's different.
Well, I got to tell you, I don't think it's, what you just described in that area of just the creativeness and whatnot. It's not for everybody. You know what I mean? And it was a challenging, unique time. In the various locations that you may have found yourself, the backlash against it. And being a lawyer.
Yeah, I mean, you were going in, in 2009, you were going into counties where, man, you were like the only guy that raised these issues, like using marijuana on bond, absolutely not. And then you'd have to file stuff and fight it and educate the bench. Now the bench is fairly educated for the most part in terms of most courts.
They figured out how to. They figured out themselves how to not let it work. I remember walking out of a courtroom.
Well, yeah. If they don't want it to let it work, they don't work. I mean, even in California, under California state law with medical marijuana, if the judge doesn't want it to work, the judge has the authority not to let you smoke while you're on bond or on probation. That's their authority. They have authority. It's discretionary, not mandatory. In Michigan, we don't have any authority on it one way or the other. It's just really whatever the fuck they want to do. And the truth is that part of the conversation has to do with the general social implications of legalization. In 2 years, where is it going to be? We're going to have hopefully some open and successful and unrated stores in Colorado and Washington, and a pretty, regulated and safe market that the sky doesn't fall on, and then we're going to have jury nullification issues. Now we kind of do a little bit, but, it's really going to be that when, voters and people see something that's completely legal where the state benefits and taxes and regulates and now highly criminalized, because we're still on a highly criminalized model,
Well, I wanted to say, reflecting back on that time, I remember I'd represented a kid who was maybe like 22, got pulled over for whatever, and police officers smelled marijuana, and the whole thing's on video. And he's like, "Well, why didn't you make marijuana?" It's like, because he's like, "Well, why don't you take pills like everybody else? What's wrong with you?" Like it's all on video and stuff. And they grab him by the arm, they take him in the back of the car and drag him to court, and they show up with his card and doctor and blah blah blah. And the judge dismissed it, and the prosecutor, came out and was talking. Was like, what? What they're going to start to do now? They're just going to start to drag these patients and draw blood from them. That's what they're going to do. So, wow. I mean, it was like, okay, this is the time. It was like, oh, yay, but oh, no. And, that, of course, was this long road, kind of, I mean, much of those brutal rulings, the attitudes, the direction that it was going to be taken, seems so cliche at this point, and so offensively cliche. But now the courts have kind of vindicated.
Talking about the drug war with drug cops in 2009 and talking about them in December 2012, January 2013. I mean, they're so demoralized. They are. I mean, I'm not just blowing smoke up your ass just to give you good news. They are, at least on the west side here, they are demoralized. They understand that, they can be pirates on forfeiture, on marijuana, only so much. And when you tell them, listen, fellas, in Washington, they're desensitizing drug dogs so that smell of marijuana doesn't trigger them because they don't want to, bust a bunch of cocaine and have, defense attorney file a motion, then, that's when it's the writing on the wall. That's when they're just like, I mean, certainly there are a lot of people that are still being casualties and still, there's a case law out there that lets a lot of cops do whatever they want. And we're not done yet. But it's like when we elected Obama, it didn't end racism, but it said a lot about us. And when we voted to legalize marijuana, at least 2 states, it didn't end the drug war, but it says a lot about us. And I'm real, I want to let the people listening to this that aren't in court every day know that, because it's talked about.
Agreed. I think it is too. I think, with the frustration of how the law, see, it's almost like this. When judges have cases in front of them, they're accustomed to, making rulings on law that are usually going to not necessarily apply and result in dismissals. The Michigan Medical Marijuana Act does, to which the response is, I just hate the idea of letting, going against the police or ruling this way. I just wish they'd legalize it. It's almost like in that vein. It's like they don't want to let this act serve for what it is because they either don't believe it or they think they're being taken advantage. You know what I mean? And then they're going to try to use the law. I don't know. It's a very, but I do understand what you're saying.
It's a tennis game. It's a new, it's a very broadly, relatively speaking, it's a new statute. It changes a few interpretations about, the smell of marijuana in some respects and the possession of with cards. In terms of whether or not that's immune, and obviously the Section 8 remedy is relatively radical. It's a shall dismiss, not a may dismiss. There's not a lot of discretion. There's case law that says the judge really is not allowed to weigh credibility. And so, it's a start. I mean, we have a statutory avenue to relief to dismiss somebody charged of, otherwise pretty felonious, serious things. So, yeah, put into practice in various counties, they're going to throw up every obstruction they can. In certain counties, cases are unwinnable. They're unsectionatable. I mean, you just, in 5 years, nobody's ever gotten one through. And those are counties like that. And so I practice in some of those counties. I know what that's like. And there you just don't feel like there's any real justice. But the truth is that we've moved, the political football, the conversational football, the legal football, not where we need to, but I mean, certainly we're past first down. We have kind of a new conversation about legalization, not about medicalization. And I think we're going well. I mean, I feel the difference. It's not where we need to be, and it's still arbitrary and confrontational, and in some ways, based on just these police officers that feel like they can do what they want. And
let me change things over a little bit, because I had an interaction recently with a DEA agent, and it's always interesting. Some of them are very eager to engage in the discussion about the medical marijuana debate. This one happened to be one that was worked both state and drug enforcement for the federal government, and well, I realized that everything that he said was to serve a purpose, and it was very one-sided. And the debate was, but it's just interesting to hear what they said. But these were his talking points, I should say. Number one, he's concerned for the health and safety of those people that are smoking it. You don't know what's inside of it. People are spraying it. It's very dangerous. People don't know. Furthermore, you look on the internet, other people are smoking out of these plastic bongs. Plastic with heat hurts people. This is a health issue for me. Now, I know he went on to describe his own overweightness, but nevertheless, the second thing that he had an issue with was the home grows. Like, what do you mean home grows? If Michigan Medical Marijuana grows for anything, it was so that people could grow in their basements. That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about when I'm in a neighborhood and someone rents a vacant house and sets up a grow, no one's living there, it's just plants growing. That was his thing. I just, points. Instead, he said they should take it down to a like a commercial building. That's what he suggested. I go, really? That's what you think? I don't know if I believe that, but maybe that's,
Well, I mean, a Colorado approach where you can grow 6 in Colorado, or maybe 12, which maybe it should be here, if we get that kind of approach. And then some approach where you have a, regulated sort of store, where the store probably has some commercial space where they have to grow a certain, high percentage of what they sell. I mean, that probably kind of addresses a lot of those needs. And certainly by the time we get to a presidential election where we're funded to, put another, dramatic ballot initiative through with some, with money to fund the signature campaign, then I think you're going to have a track record out west about what really this stuff does, to the community, if anything, to the court system, the misdemeanor court system, where a lot of, marijuana end users end up used to getting, at least in those states, put on
what I
probation.
said to you about what I said to you about health. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I don't really think that people that, don't ordinarily, like if they use marijuana one or several times a week and they're not tobacco users, it's definitely smoking and inhaling plastic vapor. I think that's probably carcinogenic, and I don't recommend it. But somebody that's an incidental cannabis-only smoker, not just vaporizer, they maybe they're not doing themselves any favors. They're inhaling burnt plant, combustible plant smoke. But in terms of being, a public health issue versus alcohol use, not just people that, drive or anything under the influence, but certainly what, the ethanol molecule does to your liver, does to your heart, does to your body just by its, use, even in a non-smoked way, obviously. So it's really about, that we're talking about something that's relatively benign, socially acceptable, used as a medicine and lubricant for thousands of years with not any dramatic, earth-shattering consequences. And ultimately, the voter pool believes in that, and it's something that is kind of hopefully transcending ideology between left and right to a point. And soon enough, there's not going to be people like me and you doing medical marijuana cases, because that shit won't be illegal. It won't be all this like quasi-immunity and excusability, and it's not really legal, so it's probable cause. It just won't be there. It's not, we won't need these cards.
All right, I'm closing shop tomorrow then. You give me no reason to go on.
No, there's a wider drug war that will last quite a bit longer than the next, 3, 4, 5, 6 years in Michigan.
Well, just to play, the response of this agent was, well, if they reschedule it, I think the pharmaceutical companies are going to have, more resources to fund the, we talked about that. If it's their product that they are selling, you got these huge companies with a lot of resources. They're easily going to be able to help, make sure that only licensed individuals are growing it. But and the enforcement against marijuana at that time may even be more severe. There may be more resources.
Well, there's going to be a marketplace where there's going to be boutique, kind of flavorful, well-grown, organic, or just otherwise special strains in small batches and medium-sized batches, and there's going to be, the $1, $2 joint that's going to be just, low-grade or mid-grade stuff, and there's a marketplace for all of that. I'm one where I don't think we should be afraid that there's going to be some massive corporation coming in and, thanks for frontiering this, we'll take over now. I don't think that's really what's going to happen. I think there's going to be a pretty diverse marketplace overall because this is still going to be federally legal for quite some time. I don't think it's going to be overnight changed, and so really, truly big money is not going to get as much, get as involved, particularly investment banking where you're, investing other people's money, not just, venture capitalism. So it's going to be a while before all that stuff really pans out. It's still illegal enough that only certain people want to do it.
But if pharmaceuticalization occurs before legalization, I think that causes a very interesting scenario to emerge.
Right, but the success that'll happen in the West currently, I think will, once California legalizes marijuana, because California will, no matter what, pharmaceuticalization will not prevent that. Then I think you're not going to. After a while, it's going to be impossible to exist. As a state with cannabis prohibition, where you have California plus a couple other states with, a regulated marketplace of, non-medical marijuana. And at some point, places like Utah are going to have so much marijuana on their hands that they're going to have to even concede things. I mean, that's just the way it works. I mean, even now, in terms of what I work on as a criminal defense attorney in federal court, you know, it used to be in 2008, 2009, the types of kind of medical but sort of technically violative grows, the way that kind of happened in, you know, Ryan Bazor's case, Forsberg's case, you know, the Grand Rapids and Okemos people that are now in federal prison, you know, to something bigger. Now the feds, at least in the Western District, are looking for multi-million-dollar operations, not just involving marijuana, but involving systematic laundering of proceeds in various enterprises, from various tax shelters to a lot of real estate type of scams and so forth. So they're kind of, you know, they're not really moving out of, like, the even if everything in the same thing, everything with the federal law just stayed still, the feds really in the Western District aren't kind of going after what, you know, I would call kind of medical but cooperative or commingled grows, or, you know, relatively big grows by medical. They're looking at criminals. So
focusing on the financial crime, really.
Well, they're focusing on people that are making, you know, $5, $6, $7, $8 million over a relatively short time period and hiding that. You know, that's part of it. I mean, they're also looking at, you know, conspiracies to import you know, cocaine, heroin, other types of drugs. I mean, really, once you go truly criminal, then it's a commodity, and it's about having a source at a good price and having a buyer at a better price. So, and you know, who knows? Now with PRISM, I mean, that shit seems kind of scary. And there's somebody I read about, a criminal defense attorney in federal court in Florida, who is trying to get through a discovery motion the right to look at all the calls his client made, because the carrier, Metro PCS, like, lost the data or doesn't have the data. And the defense lawyer's saying, yeah, but the NSA has the data and the government has the right to show it to us. So, certainly.
Interesting time. Listen, I want to take a quick break, but when we come back, I want to get into a couple questions that are posed, like some question and answers, legal things. I know we've got Steve Green of the Human Solutions. We're going to get to him to get him on the line. Just want to take a quick break. Can you stick around?
All right, I'm gonna. You want me to stick around, or you can handle the questions?
Well, it's up to you.
Whatever.
I was just going to take a quick. Cool. All right, I was just going to take a quick break, and then we'll come back and queue it up for a couple questions. I'll get Steve on and continue to talk about the history. All right, you're listening to Planet Green Trees. Call numbers 1-347-326-9626. Again, we get one. We're on with John Targowski, and we're going to be right back after this short break.